Hi, I'm Karen Hill, and it's interesting that we spend millions and millions of dollars on educating about drug prevention. Don't take drugs because they're bad for you, and really allowing parents to worry themselves sick about if my child gets into drugs because they're in a mix of bad company. They really don't need to worry about that at all because, in all honesty, people are addicted to drugs because of their pain. So they're not going to go do drugs because they're in bad company. It's because they have suffered some form of trauma, and no one promotes that it's possible to heal from this. Another thing that's crazy is that last year we've spent over $80 million in this country on raising awareness of depression. How many people who have suffered from depression do you think have suffered from childhood trauma or abuse? Because studies show that it's over 80%. And how many of you have ever heard one word about what happened in your childhood, how that might have helped you heal from your depression or anxiety? So what's hard to believe is that we're actually raising awareness so that we can feed the pharmaceutical companies, so people can take more medication. And, antidepressants are really at an all-time high. And so why is there silence about childhood trauma? Why don't we talk about this? Why are we not allowed to acknowledge childhood trauma? We're not encouraged to heal from childhood trauma. And what we know of neuroplasticity and what science has shown is that now it is possible. It's interesting when you talk to people in the hospital who have actually tried to kill themselves, especially young people, and they all have one common complaint. They wonder why no one ever asked them why. And if they did, they would get the same answer from all of those young people. Because of my internal pain from my childhood. Because I think I'm worthless. Because I'm worth nothing. Because no one cares about the fact that I have been abused. Do you know around 90% of all women who have attempted suicide have suffered from sexual abuse or child abuse of some type? And it's interesting that nobody ever asks us about what happened in your childhood. So what exactly is childhood trauma anyway? Because childhood trauma really covers a huge spectrum. It covers abandonment, death of the parents, alcoholic parents, childhood sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, and of course, natural disasters. But what happens when a trauma occurs? A trauma is more emotion than the brain can handle with. Trauma at the time it's happening to the person in an age-appropriate way thinks that their life is being threatened. And the brain reacts to this trauma and develops differently, which is why childhood trauma has a bigger effect on the whole of where the brain operates later in life. Trauma cannot be remembered. And that's because the conscious brain shuts down during the trauma. I'll give you an example of this. You may or may not remember that Princess Diana's bodyguard, after they were trying to find out what actually happened in the accident, they hypnotized him. The French police hypnotized this man so that he could remember, so that the part of his brain could be unlocked where it was being stored, so that he could say what actually happened at the moment of impact, because consciously he couldn't remember. Because right before a trauma occurs, we call that T-1, is where our brains actually go offline. And when the trauma is over, you either survived or you didn't. But your brain shuts off for that moment during the trauma to actually protect you. So everything that happened during the trauma is actually buried in your subconscious, but you won't be consciously aware of what happened at the impact of the trauma. So if you want to get down to the core of what the trauma was, hypnosis is the best way, and really the only way that I know that can get into the subconscious mind, because consciously you were offline. And once you understand what the trauma was, what it really was, where it came from, you can start to heal from it. Because otherwise, your brain actually feels like you're still living in the trauma, and it will continue to protect you. So until we meet again, I'm wishing you all the best.